To ask what college is for, to ask what education is for, is to ask what life is for, what society is for, what people are for. Some of you may recognize that I stole that last phrase from Kurt Vonnegut, whose central question, he says, is, what are people for? Do students ever hear this? No. What they hear is a constant drumbeat in the public discourse, and I would venture to say often in the private discourse, that seeks to march them in the opposite direction. When policymakers talk about higher education, from the president all the way down, they talk exclusively in terms of math and science. We did a little Q&A, a taped Q&A before this event, and Lonnie asked me which public figure I'm most angry at, and I said our president. He's not the one that I dislike the most, but he's the one that I'm most angry at. And I was thinking in particular of what he said to a bunch of students in Ohio earlier this year, which is don't major in art history. He didn't seem to realize that about 1/3 of 1% of students major in art history. But it's not just about art history. It's about the larger message, right? Journalists and pundits, some of whom were humanities majors, and none of whom are engineers or nurses, never tire of lecturing the young about the necessity of thinking prudently when choosing a course of study, the naivete of wanting to learn things just because you're curious about them. Top 10 majors, those lists you see online, means the most employable, not the most interesting. Top 10 jobs means average income, not job satisfaction. What are you going to do with that? The inevitable sneering question goes. Liberal arts has become a put-down, and English major a punchline. I actually blame my new friend Stephen Colbert for that. It's become the default punchline. I mean, the only thing that was novel about Obama's remark is that he said art history majors are not English majors. Now, it's not like it's not like the practicality police have that much to worry about. If about 1/3% of students major in art history now, about 3% major in English. 3%. You would think it's 33% from the way people talk. Business now accounts for 21% of all majors in this country, which is half again as much, 1.5 times as much, as all of the arts and humanities combined. All the performing arts and visual arts and all of the humanities combined add up to 14%. You know that UCLA has been doing a study for over 40 years where they ask incoming freshmen across the country to name the things that they think is important to them about college. And they can name not just the most important, they can check as many boxes as they want. In 1971, about 80% said, in the language of the survey, developing a meaningful philosophy of life is one of the important things they want to get out of college. About 80%, and about 40% said becoming very well off. Not well off, very well off. So it was 80% and 40%. As of 2011, the numbers had basically reversed. Only 40% said philosophy of life. About 80% said becoming very well off. For well over 30 years, we've been loudly announcing that happiness is money with a side order of fame. No wonder students have come to believe that college is all about getting a job. Now, you need to get a job, but you also need to get a life. People ask what the return on investment of college is. Well, what's the return on investment of having children, or spending time with your friends, or reading a book, or listening to music? The things that are most worth doing are worth doing for their own sake. Anyone who tells you that the sole purpose of education is the acquisition of negotiable skills is attempting to reduce you to a productive employee at work, a gullible consumer in the market, and a docile subject of the state. What's at stake when we ask what college is for is nothing less than our ability to remain fully human. And I would say much of what I'm saying about college is true of education in general. It applies equally well to high school. And I should also say, parenthetically, that while I focus on college, because that's what I know, and that's the primary audience I'm addressing, this is indeed a larger system with many components, many moving parts, and what happens in high school is clearly one of the most important parts. But it's also true that I think you'll probably agree with me, that the linchpin of the system is the college admissions process. Almost everything that happens now to a kid on the North Shore of Chicago, or many other places around the country, from the time they're in 7th grade, or maybe from the time they're in junior kindergarten, until the time they graduate from high school, or at least until the time they get into college, is done for the sake of satisfying what everybody knows will be the requirements of the college admissions process at selective schools like Northwestern and Chicago and Stanford and the Ivy League. So that's another, I mean, that's the ultimate reason to focus on college for me, not just because that's what I happen to know. So what is college for? Well, the first thing that it's for is to teach you to think. Now, I know that's a cliche. I know colleges say that all the time, but I don't actually mean what colleges usually mean by that. It doesn't mean simply developing the mental skills particular to individual disciplines, or even the ability to acquiring the ability to work across disciplines, as important as that is. It means developing the habit of skepticism and the capacity to put it into practice. It means learning not to take things for granted so you can reach your own conclusions. So you no longer have to say things like, what are the hidden incentives around us that are shaping the way we dream? Because now you're shaping your dreams for yourself. Before you can learn, you have to unlearn. You don't arrive in college a blank slate. You arrive already having been inscribed with all the ways of thinking and feeling that the world is instilling around you from the moment that you're born. The myths, the narratives, the pieties, the assumptions, the sacred words. Your soul, in the words of Alan Bloom, speaking of the University of Chicago, he said, your soul is a mirror of what's around you. I always noticed as a teacher of freshmen that my students could be counted on to have an opinion about whatever subject I mentioned the moment I mentioned it. And it's not because they had thought about it already, right? It's because their minds were kind of like a chemical bath of conventional attitudes that would immediately precipitate out of solution and coat whatever object you introduced in kind of a hard, impenetrable shell. I've also noticed that this is not a phenomenon confined to 18-year-olds. Society is a conspiracy to keep itself from the truth. We pass our lives submerged in propaganda, advertising messages, political rhetoric, the journalistic affirmation of the status quo, the platitudes of popular culture, the axioms of party, sect, and class, the bromides we exchange every day on Facebook, the comforting lies our parents tell us, and the sociable ones our friends do, the steady stream of falsehoods that we each tell ourselves all the time to stave off the threat of self-knowledge. Plato had a name for this. He called it doxa, opinion, and it is as powerful a force among progressives as it is among conservatives, in Massachusetts as in Mississippi, for atheists as for fundamentalists. Nobody escapes from this. Nobody is exempt from this. The first purpose of a real education, of a liberal education, is to liberate us from doxa by teaching us to recognize it, to question it, and to think our way around it.